I tell you, I was going to call you earlier and I didn't. Did I let you down? I apologize if I did.
Yeah, you did, but that's okay.
Well, you know, was I going to call you on the way down? Is that what it was? No, I did.
Yeah, you
No,
said you were going to try. You didn't say the definite, but
wait a minute. I did. I talked to you on the way down part way. Yeah, I was driving um down from Camden down to Portland when I talked to you. Right?
oh yeah. Never mind, I forgot because somebody interrupted me and it got disconnected.
But oh, your phone just now, you mean? You got disconnected?
So you were talking to me earlier.
Oh, that's right. You know what happened? We either got disconnected or you fell asleep while I was chatting with you.
No, somebody else called me. You were only talking for another half an hour, I bet, before you found out I was even gone.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I finally scooted over to Don and chatted with him. That's what happened. So I ended up chatting with him on.
I was like, oh no, and then I thought you might call back after realizing that, I was like, oh, I probably got or something. So I was like, oh, never mind.
Well, I'll tell you, what an amazing gift. My mother loved those flowers. You know what she called them? Patriotic flowers. Because it was the red, white, and blue, yeah.
Right?
And I tell you, I got the recordings, and sure enough, the recording has it that she doesn't want the restraining order to be threatening over my head. And my stepbrother was hoping it would stay in place because he goes with the brother and the nephew. But when my mother said what mattered is that I didn't want it to be there, and that's all that matters. In other words, it wasn't him wanting to stop it, but my mother let him. She said, I let him know what I wanted.
Right.
So my mother's very quietly trying to say, without coming out with it directly, that it was her opinion, not his, that mattered. So my mother literally did something she hasn't done for a long time. She put her foot down and said, no, I don't want a restraining order going on in my family. So that was a huge breakthrough. Because she was afraid that if she spoke against him, that she would lose him as a bookkeeper and as somebody that comes visits and cares for her. And he felt like that. He felt like she felt like if she let him down, that she would not have the blessings of his company and care. And something happened for her over the last week when I began to say, look, please talk to him before you die, so that he knows I didn't punch his father, and that we got along, we got forgiven each other and had reconciliation. And I believe it got stirred in her heart, and that she realized that it was important. Even though she tried to have me avoid him at night when he'd come at night, she wanted me to come during the day. I was there toward after dinner, whatever. He comes in. She forgot that I was supposed to be gone, and then she was so glad to see that I was there, confronting him in a nice way. She was so proud of me that I wasn't angry, because she's always afraid that I'm going to do what the relatives think I'm going to be, which is all angry. And, the devil tries to paint a picture of us. You know what I mean? Like you, a falling down, raging alcoholic.
Exactly.
So they paint me as a religious freak that wants to impose my religion on everybody. If they give me an inch, I'll take a mile, kind of a thing.
Right.
You know how the devil is. He's got to paint.
I already got the sense of that a long time ago.
I figured you did. So my mother actually put her foot down for the first time in 3-4 years.
I'm glad she deserves to be able to do that.
She had that power all along. But
no, I know, but like I said, I can kind of understand that she's not a pretty chick. She has things going on, and she'd rather try to have it be comfortable for everyone, which is not. It's making it hard for the rest of the family, and if she dies without trying harder. So good thing. I'm so glad she did, because like you said, we deserve to know that wasn't that, whatever misunderstanding was whatever else, but you guys already had many friends, so.
You said you guys already had friends. Who are you referring to?
No, you guys became friends after.
You guys meaning me and my mother?
No, you and his father, or whatever you just said.
Oh, we were reconciled later on after having a division, you mean?
Right, yeah.
Exactly. And the son didn't want to hear it, but he had to because I was saying it in front of my mother. If my mother were not there, he would have walked away or gotten angry with me and called me. But because my mother was there and she knows I reconciled with my stepfather, she was married to him. She knows what I told him is true. I said, we reconciled, and I took him to Holy Communion over at the Episcopal Church, even though that's not where I go normally. And I said it was one of the most beautiful experiences I had. My mother, your father, and I went up and took communion together because we wanted to let bygones be bygones. And John was as quiet as a stone. He just sat there and couldn't believe that I was telling him that. But he knew if he said anything, my mother would say, no, it's true, John. Can you imagine what that was like?
Yeah.
That was a precious moment.
Definitely.
This is the same man, my stepbrother, in 2016. I said, this is my mother, and I don't want her to be heavily drugged when there's natural ways to deal with her issue. And when I said, this is my mother, that's why I'm expressing my concern. I'd already spent 20 minutes talking to the doctor and asking, why don't you do natural? And, and of course you can't because you're a doctor. You're paid to work with the pharmaceutical big drug companies. You guys are you're married to the pharmaceutical as a doctor. Boy, that made the doctor really upset. But what I'm saying is, that's when John Andrews looked at me over from Maine Medical Center where we were at Dr. Stein's office, where my mother was right next to Dr. Stein, then stepbrother John Andrews, then Elias, then me, and then the new caregiver that was ready to chomping at the bit to take over the dispensary caregiving. And I was circled all by all these people, my mother and me, surrounded by drug-based people. And John, my stepbrother, looked at me when I said, this is my mother. That's why I'm expressing a concern here, because this is my mother. And John said, no kidding. No kidding, it's your mother. And I said, John, and I have a reason to speak because I must speak in defense of my mother. And he was...
Exactly. I have one mother, and she really loves you or whatever, of course she does, but even if you guys didn't really get along, you have the right.
Correct. And so that's why we separated ways, because he pulled away from me. I never pulled away from him. But he was so angry because he felt like his father had, with the same Parkinson's disease, should have had even more of that drug called Cinemet. So he was the exact opposite. He believed the more you drug him, the better you can heal the Parkinson's. So the devil is using drugs to tear families up. So he would not speak to me for the last 3 years. So he sees me with my mother last night. He comes in, and he's furious. He's looking at me as my mother's his back to him. He's coming in. He sees me talking to my mother. I'm seated there with the Scrabble game that he brought over, with his names and scores with my mother right there in the plastic bag. And I said, I brought this Scrabble game out so that the two of you can play. I wasn't going to play his game. I wanted to let him have it with my mother. I didn't want her to be exhausted with it before he got to play with her. I was being respectful, but I pulled it out. And I said, I wasn't planning to be here when you got here because I was trying to avoid, because I didn't want to get involved in making my mother uncomfortable. But I said, actually, it's good that I'm here, that we could see each other, because your father and I were reconciled. And your father would want us to be reconciled, is what I was implying.
Yeah.
He didn't have a word to say when I mentioned that. I said, your father said, I love you, Jonathan, because I love your mother. I love your mother, and that's why I love her children. And I said, John, that's the father that I appreciate. Your father was a noble man, and I look forward to seeing him. And I meant in heaven, but I didn't say that because he would get frustrated at that. He doesn't talk about God and stuff. But I did what I could, and boy, the Holy Spirit was right there. He didn't say a word the whole time for about 5 minutes right there. Then I go around him, kiss my mother on the right cheek, and with my hands upon her shoulders, she puts her hands up. I said, I love you, mother, and she said, I love you too. And I tell you what, that man realized he was wrong. And he has power of attorney over my mother, not one of her blood children, but him as a stepbrother, which is because my older brother dropped the ball. He's not around. This man is around and does a lot. But my mother wasn't going to let him with power of attorney be a bully, because when I got out of the room, they had a talk. And that this morning, this is the day after, she told me this morning before I left her place that I said, well, was he glad about burying the hatchet, putting away the hatchet, because he says it's the hatchet. We need to bury the hatchet, bury the axe. Stop the fight. I said, he said that? Something like that. She said, well, not those words, but something like that. I said, is he happy with that? Does he want to put the hatchet away? And she, you know what her answer was? He knows what I want. In other words, he doesn't want to bury the hatchet. He's perfectly glad to kill me with the axe. But he knows what I want. I want to bury the axe. Isn't that amazing? She quietly said it that way. She didn't come out and say, oh no, my mother's not the type of person to say, oh yeah, what?
Oh, somebody just fucking pulled out of the parking lot and burned the fucking rubber at the end of the parking lot. Yay.
Okay, but don't let it distract from what I'm sharing with you right now. I'm sharing with you that my mother could have said, this man still hates me, still hates you, Jonathan, and he did not want to bury it, but I told him that it's my desire to put the axe in the ground and put the sand over it. My mother didn't say it that way. She said it in a very indirect way. She said, when I said, well, did he actually want to stop and bury the axe? And she said, he knows what I want. See how carefully she puts it? Do you see how carefully she put that?
Yeah.
That she did not want...
She has always been that way. I've noticed the only couple of times I see her how careful she was at what she said.
Say that again. I didn't understand what you said.
I said I could tell the 2 times I saw her before how she was careful at what she said and how volume she said it and everything.
You notice when she says something really important, it goes down, the volume goes way down?
Yeah, I have.
Oh my. You've seen both sides of my mother.
Yeah, I have.
Ooh, you saw both sides. You saw it. I couldn't believe it. She said, I'm calling the police if you stay here any longer. I said, you go right ahead. All they're going to do is find out that I'm here because you're my mother, and I'm going to honor you as my mother.
Exactly.
Right at that time, you heard her talking like that. You turned around before you heard the rest of that conversation.
Yeah.
I said, you go right ahead. I called her on her bluff. She's trying to scare me. I said, Mother, I love you too much to be scared from a policeman. I didn't say that, but that's what she knew. But the other time, my mother was as sweet as a mouse, wasn't she? The other time you came to the house, she was very, very sweet, wasn't she? You there? I just lost her.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system. Your call has been forwarded to an automatic...
Well, that's odd. That's odd.